I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, remember, always protect your face.
Frontrunners Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are hoping to deliver a knockout blow to their rivals.
Knockout blows to the rivals.
A knockout blow.
Knockout blow.
Knockout blow.
Knockout blow.
Knockout blow. Knockout blow.
Knockout punch.
Fight night in Indiana for both parties this evening, but oh my, the Republicans. For them, it has become the Gauntlet and Gary, the Bender in South Bend. In one corner, Donald J. Trump, billionaire. In the other corner, the now emotional Texas Senator, Ted Cruz. As Hoosiers went to the polls today, these two Republican heavyweights clashed in one of the nastiest verbal matches of this entire nasty campaign. Things already gone several rounds, starting this morning when Trump went on Fox and Friends and unbidden brought up a fully unsubstantiated National Enquirer story about a purported link between Cruz's father and the man who shot JFK.
His father was with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to Oswald's being, shot. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. What is this right prior to his being shot? And nobody even brings it up. I mean, they don't even talk about that. What was he doing with Lee Harvey Oswald shortly before the death, before the shooting? It's horrible.
So Trump takes a National Enquirer story and just states it as fact. Speaking to reporters in Evansville, Indiana this morning after Trump, Cruz counterpunched hard, unloading a remarkable roundhouse of his own insults, insinuations, and imminent warnings to Indiana voters and basically the entire universe. Cruz went on for a long time. Here are the highlights from his extraordinary string of indignation.
Donald Trump alleges that my dad was involved in assassinating JFK. This is nuts. This is not a reasonable position. This is just kooky. And while I'm at it, I guess I should go ahead and admit, yes, my dad killed JFK. He is secretly Elvis, and Jimmy Hoffa is buried in his backyard. I'm going to tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. Donald Trump is such a narcissist that Barack Obama looks at him and goes, dude, what's your problem? Everything in Donald's world is about Donald. The man is utterly amoral. Morality does not exist for him. Donald is a bully. There is a reason Donald builds giant buildings and puts his name on them everywhere he goes. Donald will betray his supporters on every issue. Donald is terrified by strong women. He lashes out at them. Donald Trump is a serial philanderer, and he boasts about it. Describes his battles with venereal disease as his own personal Vietnam. It is only the good sense and good judgment of Indiana that can pull us back. We are staring at the abyss. And I have incredible faith in Hoosiers.
Wow. All right. So in a statement after that, Trump responded saying, quote, Ted Cruz is a desperate candidate trying to save his failing campaign. It's no surprise he's resorted to his usual tactics of over-the-top rhetoric that nobody believes. Over the last week, I have watched Lion Ted become more and more unhinged as he's unable to react under the pressure and stress of losing. Today's ridiculous outburst only proves what I've been saying for a long time, that Ted Cruz does not have the temperament to be president of the United States. So said Donald Trump. This has upset Ted Cruz, obviously. If Trump wins big in Indiana tonight, though, Cruz is going to be even more upset, I assume. And that gives rise to the question, John. If Trump wins Indiana and say wins it big, what options does Ted Cruz have?
I would like to pause before answering that question and just comment for a moment briefly on what we witnessed today. You know, when Trump says that Cruz's response suggests that he does not have the temperament to be president of the United States, making the allegation that Trump made today on the basis of a National Enquirer story, wholly unsubstantiated, wholly uncorroborated, wholly without any basis that we know of, in fact, and wholly unprompted.
And hilariously, his thing was, why isn't anyone talking about this?
Right. It is Cruz is right. It's nuts, and it demonstrates a lack of temperamental suitability to the Oval Office on Trump's part. Having said that, Trump has been brilliant throughout this campaign at finding ways to get under the skin of his rivals, and Lion Ted didn't do it for months and weeks and months of it now. Today, Trump finally did it. He set off a psychic bomb inside Ted Cruz's head.
Although when he tweeted the picture of Heidi Cruz, he set it off a little.
Well, he did a little bit. I'm just saying, here's the thing. They're both behaving abominably here. Yeah. And there's just, I mean, again, we will talk about what Cruz's options are, but you have to say, this thing is a disgrace. The entire thing today has been a disgrace to the Republican Party that these are the two guys left standing having this kind of exchange on the day of a crucial primary.
Add some more time to the clock, control room, because we got a lot to say here. Look, Ted Cruz, I think, has done 4 things this week I have never seen in my career.
Yeah.
He made a public deal with John Kasich about which states people campaign in. He chose a running mate.
Yes.
Yesterday, he allowed a heckler to occupy him and didn't walk away when the guy started insulting him to his face. And now this. I've never seen a performance like this in my career.
Horrible.
Covering presidents.
Horrible.
Not just horrible, but I mean...
Desperate, flailing.
I mean, we didn't even show the whole thing.
No.
Look,
of course not.
In Trump
not
world,
for 13 minutes.
In Trump world tonight, there's a lot of speculation that Ted Cruz is going to get out of the race. The AP wrote a story saying that if he loses tonight, he's going to give a somber speech, that he might have to get cut staff. I believe that the pressure on him if he loses Indiana tonight will be much stronger than even some of his aides understand to get out of the race.
I agree. I said yesterday on this show that I thought if Trump won big as the margin of the most recent polling suggests, and he wins all the delegates, I think, and I still think, that Ted Cruz will be out of the race, if not tomorrow, but by the end of the week, partly because of the pressure and partly because he has no path. It will be almost impossible to accomplish the minimalist goal, which is of just stopping Trump from getting to 1237.
I think Cruz has 3 options if he loses big tonight. One is to get out. One is to basically stop trying to win primaries and caucuses with any great effort and focus completely on rallying people to upend the rules at the convention and find some way to, yes, steal the nomination from Donald Trump. The middle option, if he loses big tonight, of trying to stop Trump from getting a majority simply by campaigning hard in the remaining states will not work.
Not going to work. And I think that
it's one or the other. It's get out or fix the convention.
And the one thing that's become clear is that because Cruz, in the words of John Boehner, Lucifer in the flesh, and I use that not to say that he is Lucifer in the flesh, but to suggest the degree of loathing on the part of the kind of people who he would need to rally in order to change the rules, in order to steal the convention. It's just not there. Cruz does not have the support of enough people within. That's always been his problem as a champion of the Never Trump movement.
But he's got more support on that game than he will in the voters in the upcoming states if Trump wins.
I agree, but I'm just saying that just tells you how bad his options are, because neither of these options is really a workable option. This was the deal right here. This state was the deal, where the Never Trump people would rally, they would repeat Wisconsin, they would do it behind Ted Cruz, and now it looks like, and again, we don't know, but it looks like we're headed towards a decisive Donald Trump victory.
One of the reasons his options will narrow if he loses big tonight is donors, both directly to his entities and to the anti-Trump movement. They will give up. These are people who do not throw good money after bad. They want a return on their investment. There's no reason, except for the fact that it's an open primary, why Cruz couldn't win here. And if he loses big, that's it.
All right. For the Never Trump folks of whom we've been speaking, Ted Cruz beating Donald Trump in Indiana was seen as sort of an essential ingredient in this recipe for keeping Trump from getting to 1237 in order to get the right delegates so he could secure the nomination on a first convention ballot. But Mark, my question is, and we kind of addressed this already, but if Trump wins tonight and Cruz does drop out, as I think we both are basically saying we think is the likeliest thing that's going to happen, is there anything for all of those folks in the Republican Party, many of them who deeply, deeply believe that Donald Trump should not, cannot, must not be the nominee, is there anything they can do at this point?
Their options really dwindle, and of course that's why they rallied around Cruz, even though they weren't particularly fond of him. You know, John Kasich will think he'll have his moment. I like and respect John Kasich. I'm very skeptical that suddenly people rally around him. The problem is you need a horse, and there's no obvious horse. There's no, former nominee, elder statesman, consensus person that everybody likes. Paul Ryan's not going to put himself forward. So I think if Cruz gets out of the race, the Stop Trump movement largely collapses. There'll still be holdouts. But in terms of Trump getting control of the convention, winning a majority, being the consensus nominee, being blessed by Reince Priebus, I think all that ends.
The biggest problem is going to be on some level, apart from the fact that both Cruz and Kasich have proven to be such weak champions of the Never Trump movement, and Kasich's performance in the last week has been no better than Cruz's, maybe a little bit better, but that's not saying much. They're both going to be broke. And you're going into states where, what are you going to compete in New Jersey and California? With what money are Trump or Cruz going to compete? And without a candidate, the Never Trump movement is done.
Twitter and the internet will fill up, and some of cable TV, with speculation about who could step forward now and rally people. It's just not going to happen. Trump's going to have the delegates. If Cruz gets out, if he wins big tonight, Cruz gets out.
Some late entry who's going to come in suddenly and ride in.
It's not going to happen. So then the question is, where does all that energy go? You had Mark Salter, former advisor to John McCain, saying today he was going to be for Hillary.
I'm with her.
The question then for me, the biggest question is, how many people between now and California, prominent Republicans, say that?
Right, and how many end up on the other side saying the opposite?
Right. All right, easy to forget. It was just a couple weeks ago. Ted Cruz was actually ahead in public polling in Indiana. Then came Donald Trump's big New York victory, and then last week, that sweep of all the Acela primary states 7 days ago. So, how did we get here where we are now? Cue up the recap.
Ted Cruz, Indiana. Here's what happened. Kasich agrees to avoid the state. Cruz plays it up.
It is big news today.
Kasich plays it cool.
What's the big deal?
Cruz misses a layup.
That basketball ring.
And goes for a rebound.
Harley Fiorina.
Who falls off the stage? Bad metaphor. Worst metaphor?
Lucifer in the flesh.
Governor Mike Pence says he'll vote for Cruz, but likes the other guy too.
I particularly want to commend Donald Trump.
Then clarifies his support.
I am supporting Senator Ted Cruz.
Cruz's dad goes further.
The alternative could be the destruction of America.
Trump responds with one conspiracy.
What was he doing with Lee Harvey Oswald?
While Cruz's wife debunks another.
I know pretty well who he is.
Cruz gets heckled by adults.
In line, Ted!
Cruz gets heckled by children. Cruz suggests a punishment.
When a child behaves that way, they get a spanking.
Colbert suggests a slogan.
Ted Cruz 16, he hits kids.
John, very tough week for Ted Cruz, but the question is, was there anything he could have done? He obviously didn't do great this week, but had he performed better, close to flawless, could he have won, or was the Trump win preordained by virtue of the momentum he got from those recent wins?
I think Trump had the wind at his back, but I do think that Cruz's performance has hurt him substantially. I mean, it's hard to know. It would have been I think it's possible that Cruz could have won. But, indiscriminate flailing, I've said this a million times, it's just not a good look for any candidate. And that is what it has seemed. Yeah. From the moment that they struck that deal a week ago Sunday, the Cruz-Kasich alliance, like, this makes sense in some weird way in my head, but it's not going to sit right with voters, and it has the look of desperation, and that is just, as I say, not a good look for any candidate.
I mean, I think that probably couldn't have stopped him, but I'll just give you two examples. If they'd struck the deal but not announced it, if Kasich had basically just abandoned it,
no one really would have noticed.
Yeah.
Kasich could have said,
now
whatever.
Kasich may not have gone for that because he needed to say, I got these two other states in my pocket. But if they'd somehow struck the deal in a way and done the PR better, and then with no disrespect meant to Carly Fiorina, if he had picked a wow running mate, not someone who'd been campaigning with him for weeks, someone who they telegraphed he was vetting, if they had done a wow pick and that person had really dominated the news, then I think, things could have been a little bit different.
I mean, I know that they made these moves because they recognized that they were in trouble in Indiana. But the truth is that Ted Cruz won Wisconsin without any of this, without any gimmickry. And it's a different state, but it's a state that conceivably could have been better for Cruz. It strikes me that if I think he would probably be performing better and would have done better tonight, whether he won or not, if he had just campaigned as straight Ted Cruz the same way he campaigned in Wisconsin.
I remember after Wisconsin talking to the Cruz strategists about the upcoming contest, and they conceded that the Northeast states were going to be good for Trump, but I don't think they understood the extent to which big wins by Trump there would change the race.
Well, or that they appreciate that he could win as big as he did. Everyone was surprised by that. All right, coming up, what is at stake for the Democrats tonight in Indiana? We'll talk about a whole bunch of things related to Team Blue and more after these words from our sponsors. Let us now turn our attention to the blue end of the political spectrum. Team Brooklyn has been reaching out to reporters of late, trying to lower expectations in Indiana, suggesting that after leading in the Hoosier State polls for weeks, Hillary Clinton may not only fail to deliver that fabled knockout blow to Bernie Sanders, she may, actually lose, which means we'll all soon be focusing on the next contest on the Democratic nominating calendar. Kentucky and West Virginia both voting a week from today, followed a week later by the closed primary in Oregon on May 17th. Then, after caucuses in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands in early June, the big finale. 6 states voting on June 7th, including the colossal delegate prize in California. So, Mark, my question, looking at that calendar, thinking about all this stuff, does the Sanders upset tonight in Indiana, should it happen, change the trajectory of this race in any meaningful, and I do stress the word meaningful, way?
A win tonight doesn't change the trajectory of the outcome. But if Bernie Sanders can win tonight and then go on a winning streak in states that should set up pretty well for him, which we've known for a while, he can get to June 7th with Hillary Clinton still fighting. And that's going to occupy her a little bit. Doesn't mean she has to focus only on him. But a win tonight allows him to continue to occupy her pretty extensively.
It is clear that the Clinton campaign is, they are clearly braced for a loss tonight in Indiana. Yeah. She may end up pulling it out, but they're braced for a loss. And they also are braced for a loss in West Virginia. They believe that they're in pretty good shape in Kentucky. But they're also kind of questioning themselves now about the decision to not spend any money in Indiana, about how they're allocating advertising resources. Initially, they had said they didn't want to spend any money in California, New Jersey. Now they might just do that, depending on what Sanders does. This is a thorn in her side, the prospect of this thing stretching out, and Sanders now saying that he wants to take this all the way and make it a contested convention in Philadelphia. So that's meaningful. That's meaningful. As you said, doesn't change the outcome. She's going to be the Democratic nominee on almost all likelihood. But it is meaningful that this is becoming more of a horror show for her than it is for Donald Trump.
Yeah, it also does not allow her to start to basically make the case, I am the stronger candidate for independence, I'm the stronger candidate in dealing with economic unhappiness, I'm the stronger candidate in terms of potential battleground states. Indiana won by Barack Obama the first time. So it's not a great loss for her if she does lose. But again, Bernie Sanders needs a winning streak here, or he keeps moving further and farther away from relevance. The other thing is, just based on the math, a win tonight for him allows him again to argue to go harder into California.
Right. All right. So coming up, we read some general election tea leaves with the great Al Hunt. We'll be right back with that.
Welcome back. The frontrunners in both parties are trying to shed their primary challengers and shift their general election message. Joining us now to talk about how that effort is going and what we can expect to see in the coming days is a man who knows general elections pretty well. Indeed, Bloomberg View columnist Al Hunt. So, Al, we both expect, we talked about before, this contest to some extent in both parties to go till June, since neither one will have neither frontrunner will have a majority. Are either Clinton or Trump better positioned at this point, do you think, to run out the nomination process but turn to organizing for the general?
Oh, I think it's, the primary's over. It's over after tonight. They may go on for a while, but we have the general election matchup. Clinton is in stronger shape right now. Trump has a lot of work to do. I don't think losing tonight in Indiana, which he might do, will really make much difference at all for her. But they both need to get ready, and Trump has more work to do than Clinton.
Well, I'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, what are the ways you think, there's an AP story that talked about this a little bit today, but what are in the various ways in which Trump is behind, what are the ways that will be hardest for him to catch up?
Well, I don't agree with the AP story. I think organization, obviously money matters, organization matters can mean a couple points. Trump's bigger challenges than anything in that story are, number one, issues, his total ignorance about issues. Ultimately, John, they matter. You can't go through a general election not knowing much of anything about national security, taxes, the budget, and so forth. And secondly, for all the attacks on him, most of which have been counterproductive from those PACs, there's some issues that haven't come up. And I'll give you an important one, racism. You have to go back to George Corley-Wallace to find any presidential candidate who's played the race card the way Donald Trump has. It may be attractive to some of his core supporters. It'll turn off independents and young voters.
Al, there is that one mechanical issue of money that the party wants Trump to help them raise, not just for his race, but down ballot.
Right.
Do you think Trump can and will turn to being the kind of fundraiser the Republican Party has normally had at the top of the ticket?
Well, he has to try. He doesn't have a lot of experience in that regard, does he, Mark? But he doesn't, I talked to a few billionaires, not very many, and it's quite clear that Trump doesn't have the inclination or the liquidity to fund his own campaign. So he has to try to do that. And how well he does it and how much some of those big donors would like to figure out a way to focus on the congressional races rather than the presidential race will be instructive and important.
So just stay with that for a second, Al. We saw today news that Ed Rollins is going to join a pro-Trump super PAC. Is the solution here for Trump to just go big on the super PAC front? And you don't need that many billionaires who are willing to write really big checks for you to be able to get up to the $1 billion you need to run a general election. Is that like the play for Trump, or does that undercut one of his key messages in this nomination fight, which has been, I'm not bought and paid for, I don't owe anything to the special interests?
John, Donald Trump has never been bothered or impeded by consistency. So I don't think he will be this time either. I love Ed Rollins doing that. I interviewed Ed Rollins for Charlie Rose just 2 weeks ago. Donald Trump would be a disaster in the general election. Ronald Reagan would be mortified by this today. But Ed wants to play. Ed wants to get in the game. And I think super PACs may be the only way that Trump can go. And there may well be, a couple big sugar daddies who so hate Hillary Clinton or the liberal Democrats that they'll fork over.
Al, put in perspective what you think of what Ted Cruz did today in response to what Trump said about his father.
Well, I think it probably wasn't helpful, but I'll tell you, if anybody ever said that about my dad when he was alive, I mean, what he said was, it's as outrageous as his racist comments. I mean, it just was, and the National Enquirer may be the Trump House organ, but to go on a radio show, whatever have you, and say that, I can understand why Cruz did what he did. I don't think it helped him.
Do you think, Al, just answering a question that Mark and I batted around earlier in the show, do you have a sense, having watched the way Cruz has performed over this last week or so in Indiana with all the gimmicks, all the Hail Marys he's thrown, do you think that he could have maybe won the state had he performed better in Indiana?
I'm not sure. I think there is that big mo, as George H.W. Bush used to call it. I think those northeastern primary wins were so big, so overwhelming that I think it's doubtful. Look, it didn't work. But he threw Hail Mary passes because when you're behind, that's the only pass you can throw. You can't march down the field with 4 yards in a cloud of dust. So, yeah, I agree it didn't work, but I don't think he had a whole lot of choices.
All right, Al, I'm going to ask you about a theory that was just floated to me by a pretty smart Republican. He said the reason Trump said this outrageous thing today about Cruz's father was to signal to Republicans, get Cruz out of the race. The longer he stays in, the more I'm going to train this stuff at another Republican, the more the party's going to be divided. Force Cruz out, let me be the nominee, and I'll start saying this stuff about the Clintons.
Well, yeah, and I think he will. I mean, they already have. Ted Cruz has to make a decision now. I think Ted Cruz went into this race thinking, I may not win this time, but I'll be well positioned for next time. And suddenly you win a couple and you think, hey, this could be my year. But I'm sure he hasn't given up those future thoughts. And I think to stay in if he loses badly tonight might be bad for him. I'm sure Trump wants him out. I'm sure that's what he's going to tell Republicans. But you know, Mark, he will focus on Hillary Clinton. He'll say the same things. But people talk about, can Trump change? No, he can't change because he hasn't changed in 45 years. He's not going to change now.
Yeah, Al, that's definitely true. Thank you, Al. Really appreciate it. Coming up, Bernie Sanders' senior advisor, Tad Devine. We're going to ask him about where everything stands in Indiana after this quick break.
The last Indiana polls will be closing soon, and our next guest will certainly be watching. Joining us now from our Washington bureau is the senior strategist for Bernie Sanders. That would be Tad Devine. Tad, give me a sense of what you think it would mean for your campaign if Bernie Sanders were to pull off what would be considered an upset by most standards in Indiana tonight.
Well, John, I think it's a big night. I mean, I think it's a demonstration that Bernie's message, resonates in a place like Indiana. I think it's a demonstration that this campaign is focused and that we're going to keep on talking to voters all the way through the end. So, particularly in light of the fact that, at this juncture, you would think the party would begin to coalesce around Hillary Clinton, given what her campaign says is an insurmountable lead. But if we win in Indiana, it clearly is not coalescing around her, and I think it means we have a lot of opportunity in the days and weeks ahead.
Tad, you look at the upcoming race in Kentucky and West Virginia. Are there any differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on the issue of the future of the coal industry?
Well, you know, I think certainly, I mean, Hillary, in some of the rhetoric that she has used, has gotten in trouble, you know, with voters there, and we saw that in the incident that happened yesterday. But I think that, you know, they both aspire to dealing with this issue. I think Bernie's plans are more ambitious in terms of imposing a carbon tax, but a lot of that revenue from the carbon tax is going to go to helping train workers in the coal industry. That's where a lot of that money is going to go towards. So I think if there is a difference, you know, it's not in the goal of trying to deal with it. Bernie is more ambitious when it comes to that goal. I think that's fair to say. But he also wants to take care of people, and I think that will come out as well.
Is it accurate to say, do you think, that he is interested in ending the coal industry's role in American power faster than she is?
No, I think what would be accurate is to say that he is deeply committed to dealing with the issue of climate change and understands that fossil fuel, not just coal, but all fossil fuel, is something that we have to take on. And he's prepared to do that. But he also understands that the changes that we need to make in our economy, whether it's in the energy sector or other sectors of our economy, should not be made on the backs of working people. And he is determined to make sure that if those changes are made, whether it's in the energy industry or in other parts, sectors of our economy, that the people who have profited enormously, whether it's the banking industry, Wall Street, or the pharmaceutical industries, are the ones who bail out the middle class instead of being bailed out by them. That's the big difference, I think, between Bernie and every candidate.
Tad, on any trajectory going towards the end of the nomination contests, Bernie Sanders will end on June 8th behind Hillary Clinton by more pledged delegates than Hillary Clinton ended behind Barack Obama in 2008, by more popular votes than Hillary Clinton finished behind Barack Obama in 2008. And yet in 2008, Hillary Clinton, even though she was closer, did not contest at the convention in Denver. She signaled immediately that she was going to support Obama the day after the last contest, and then she went to Denver and placed his name in nomination. Why does Bernie Sanders feel entitled or feel like it's appropriate to wage a contested convention when he's in a weaker position relative to her than she was in position to Obama in 2008?
Well, I think because 2016 is very different than 2008. And I think what Bernie wants to do, and I think he's right in wanting to do this, is do the best thing for the Democratic Party. Make sure the party has the chance to nominate the strongest candidate who can beat probably Trump in the general election. You know, so we'll see where we are when we get through this. First, right now, he's committed to letting everybody vote. And by the way, his participation in this process helps the Democratic Party enormously. We're going to try to register loads of young people in California, and that's going to be good for the Democratic Party. You know, we've seen in the polling, for example, Democrats saying they want Bernie Sanders to stay in this thing all the way through the convention. Very large majority of them compared to the people who want him to stop early. New York Times today, I think, editorialized about the value of his candidacy, the Democratic Party. So he's going to stay in. He's made that decision. We think we're contributing. Hopefully we'll have a debate on issues. If we have a debate on issues, I think it's good for both candidates.
So Tad, you think a contested Democratic convention and the degree of disunity that would represent, at least up until the very end, but a contested Democratic convention, while Republicans are not now, it looks like, going to have a contested convention, you think that would be good for the Democratic Party?
I do, John. In 1988, I worked for Michael Dukakis. I was a convention manager in Atlanta. We had a contest that went all the way there, and we left Atlanta with a 17-point lead on behalf of Governor Dukakis. You know, I think it all depends on how you handle it between now and then, and I think we can use that as an example of campaigns that had differences, worked out their differences, and left the convention with an enormous lead. And I think we can do that again, whoever the nominee is of our party.
Were you responsible for managing Rob Lowe in Atlanta?
No. I was not, but I did go on a trip with him on the vice presidential campaign with Lloyd Bentsen, which I did manage, and I had never seen a guy put makeup on before, so that was a big breakthrough for me personally. Okay.
Well, if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, what role would Hillary Clinton play at the convention?
Well, listen, I don't want to speculate about that. That sounds like I'm diminishing Secretary Clinton or something of that nature. You know, we're going to work really hard between now and the end of voting. We think Bernie's participation in this process is very good and valuable for the Democratic Party. We think there are big changes that we should make in the party. We should have a progressive platform, and we should change our rules to bring in more people. Those are the kind of things he's going to talk about and fight for. And when we're done with the voting, then we can start talking about the next phase of the process.
All right, Tad Devine, thanks for coming in. Always good to have you here. Coming up.
Tad's wearing makeup, by the way.
Yeah, it's true. Coming up, we've got the guy who's actually written the book on a brokered convention. Or at least he's written a book on a brokered convention. And it's a novel, but, you know, whatever. Stuart Stevens joins us live after this.
Cruz, now top strategist for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign in 2012, and this year he's giving everyone advice via Twitter, where he is the perfect combination of smart and snark. Start Stevens, a partner at Strategic Partners Media, who worked for in the last 5 presidential races for the Republicans, and is the author of the upcoming novel on a brokered convention, The Innocent Have Nothing to Fear. Stuart joins us from Los Angeles. Stuart, thank you.
Good to see you, buddy.
So if Donald Trump wins tonight, would you guess that you'd see a coalescing around him greater than what we've seen so far? More people like Chris Christie endorsing him or saying the time has come for the party to unify?
I would expect so. I think it's regrettable, but I think you would see more of an effort to do that. You know, I hope that the party will, those in the party who don't think that Donald Trump should be representative of the party or does represent the party will continue to fight all the way to the convention. He's certainly the most unpredictable candidate that we've had. A guy who today on an election is talking about Ted Cruz, his father, and the Oswald and Kennedy conspiracies. So anything can happen. I'd fight all the way.
So Stuart, what does that mean? I mean, just what are the plausible options for Never Trump, for people like you, if assuming Donald Trump wins tonight? What can you actually do between now and the convention to try to stop him from being the nominee?
Well, there's 2 levels to that. One is just where the vote counts are, the delegate counts, and until he gets to a hard 1237, he doesn't have the votes to be the nominee. The second is there's still a period between before the convention. Even if he theoretically is at 1237, I think those who don't believe that Donald Trump should be the nominee should continue to oppose him. I mean, this is someone who hasn't even released 1 year of his taxes, which is pretty extraordinary considering that he seems to be shameless about everything. What is it in his taxes that are so embarrassing to him that he thinks they're disqualifying? So I think that's the way it should go.
Stuart, when you say continue to oppose him, you mean what? Speak out against him, write op-eds, tweet? Like what are the things what tangible forms would that opposition take?
Well, all of the above, and continue to articulate in whatever form they have available why Donald Trump should not represent the Republican Party and what it would mean for the Republican Party and really, frankly, more importantly for the country, or Donald Trump to be the nominee of a major party. We've never had someone who would be a nominee of a major party who's unfit to sit in charge of on top of a national command structure. And Donald Trump is clearly unfit to be on top of a national command structure. And we can spin it and we can try to wrap him around some smart and capable people, but it really comes down to him. And there's nothing that's going to change about that.
Stuart, you've long told us that there's nothing more bitter than the intra-party fights between Republican strategists and consultants, but this is shaping up to be really bitter. You've had some leading people, Paul Manafort, Barry Bennett, others, go to work for Trump. How much pressure is there now within your community for strategists not to go work for the Trump campaign?
I don't know the answer to that because nobody ever calls me because they know that I'm against Trump.
But how do you look at people like Paul Manafort, who are now Ed Rollins, who are now going to help Donald Trump try to become the next president?
Well, look, you know, I've got nothing but positive things to say about Paul and Ed, if only because when I was coming up, they were so nice to me, and there was nothing in it for them. These are guys who aren't actively in the political consulting business anymore, who have gone on to bigger and better things, frankly, and are coming back into it to help Donald Trump.
What do you think?
I think part of it is just that.
What do you think they see? What do you think they see that you don't?
I think that they missed the game, and I think that they see that and hope that they can have an impact on somebody. I think that these are two people who would treat Donald Trump as a peer. They would not be intimidated by Donald Trump. And I think that's a good thing. Donald Trump has tended to be surrounded by people whose major qualifications is how loudly they can say yes to Donald Trump. Manafort and Rollins won't do that. And I think that's good. It's good if you're a Donald Trump person, but it's also good just in general because Donald Trump needs to be surrounded by people who tell him the truth. These guys will tell him the truth, which is good. But I don't think that they see in Donald Trump some great savior. I think it's more that They like to be part of politics.
Yep.
This is the biggest game, and they have a shot here.
Okay, Stuart, thank you very much. Stuart Stevens in California. Good to see you. Up next, the inside scoop from the reporters who cover Donald J. Trump, billionaire, and his evolving campaign. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio, Bloomberg 99.1 FM, 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
As the great Phil Mattingly would say, sup millennials? Here now to provide you with your daily dose of Donald is a tremendous Trumpian trio of remarkably respected reporters. NBC's Katie Tur, who joins us from Trump Tower, Jenna Johnson from the Washington Post, and Michael C. Bender of Bloomberg Politics. Good to see all of you. I'm going to start with Katie because she's outside the building. We'll bring the conversation in the building after we talk to Katie outside the building. Katie, I want to know two things. One, how does Trump feel about everything that's occurred on this crazy day? And two, I understand you've been talking to Ed Rollins on the phone, who's just decided to go work for a pro-Trump super PAC. Tell us about that.
Number one, I think the Donald Trump campaign is feeling extraordinarily good today, especially with that 15-point lead and that NBC News Marist poll that came out yesterday. Also, with the anecdotal evidence from on the ground today, we've had reporters out in Indiana at polling sites saying that they are seeing overwhelming response to Donald Trump over Ted Cruz, even in places where you might think Ted Cruz would do better. And I think the statement that the Trump campaign put out against Cruz today, saying that this proves, as Donald Trump has been saying, according to the statement, that Ted Cruz doesn't have the temperament to be president. I think those words are interesting coming from Trump himself, considering those are the words that oftentimes are used against him. So you can imagine the campaign was entertained by the idea of using it against Ted Cruz. Number two, John, Ed Rollins, I just spoke to him on the phone, asked him why he decided to join this super PAC, and he told me that it's just time to come together as a party, solidify and fill in the gaps that the Trump campaign might have. He said that he was a doubter at first, but that he's come around to this campaign and he wants to fundraise for it because he believes that they're going to be facing $1 billion campaign with Hillary Clinton come the fall, and the process that they have in place right now, the team that they have in place right now, just isn't going to be enough. The money they have in place right now just isn't going to be enough to beat her out. I asked him a little bit about backing Huckabee, backing Michelle Bachmann, Ross Perot, others who did not go on to win. And he said that he doesn't necessarily back the winners. He backs who he believes in, and he believes in Donald Trump. He also said, which I found interesting, is that he's had 50 years of experience in this business, this campaigning business, and he would throw all of that out the window because so far this season, nothing has been predictable, and all of the predictions, frankly, have been wrong. So he believes that Trump could pull it out. John?
Jenna, you've seen a lot of Trump outrageous things. Where would you put this Oswald thing in context of, is it business as usual for Donald Trump, or is there something different about this?
You know, we haven't seen something like this in a while. He was kind of in control of himself the last couple of months. We weren't seeing as many conspiracy theories being floated or really outrageous attacks on people. But, you know, this isn't the craziest thing that he has said or done.
I got to get it so close to the top 10.
But you know what? I would say top 5.
Yeah, top 5, okay.
I would say top 5.
Yeah.
And the timing of this too, right? I mean, he's about to call himself the presumptive nominee tonight. He needs to be reaching out to the party. 19% of Republicans say they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton. 35% say they won't back Donald Trump, and he's got a 15-point lead in Indiana, and he's picking a fight over the death of the murder of JFK.
It is a rather extraordinary thing. I wonder if you guys, we've been talking about this all day today. Is this race over if Trump wins big tonight? Is that your view that Cruz, that the Never Trump movement basically now has to basically lay down because there's no real way to stop him?
I mean, it's just becoming more and more impossible to stop him. This has been an incredible election, so anything can happen, and I think the Trump campaign is kind of taking the attitude of they've been caught off guard before. They weren't quite expecting the delegate scramble that we've seen the last few weeks, and so I think they're going to continue to play in every primary and make sure that they hit that magic number and make sure that they're not surprised by anything before the convention. But at the same time, you know, I mean, look at where he's gotten. It would be nearly impossible for anyone else to dethrone him at this point.
Katie, I was going to ask you if you thought Oswald act alone or with the help of one of the parents of one of the candidates, but instead of asking you that, I'm going to ask you this. Do you get the sense that the turmoil between Corey Lewandowski and Manafort, just a general sense of new people coming in, some people being fired, has that settled down now, or is that still a work in progress?
I think it's settled down to a degree, but I do think it is also still a work in progress, and there is still some tension there. I think we've seen a little bit more of Corey lately on the road. He's been a little bit more visual. Last Tuesday, he was talking to all the reporters. He was on all the networks. Manafort a little bit more behind the scenes. And when you ask the folks in the camp about those two, they usually give stock answers. Oh, everything's fine, but it's not necessarily the most believable. I do think it's not quite as tense as it was maybe a few weeks ago, that they're settling into their roles to a degree. Also, you know, convention season, if they get to 1237, Manafort's job is not quite as important necessarily as it was beforehand. And Corey Lewandowski, who's been with Trump this entire time and has let Trump be Trump, could potentially see his stock rise again because he's the one that's been there. He's the one that's allowed Trump to act like has acted this entire time. And I think those outrageous statements about Rafael Cruz is an example of Corey allowing the candidate to be himself.
Mike, you've covered a lot of Republicans in this cycle. Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, a whole bunch of other people. How quickly do you think, if Trump wins decisively tonight, how many of those people, which of those people, and how quickly do you think they will actually end up coming out publicly and saying they're for Trump?
I think it's going to be a while. I think it's going to take Cruz coming out to leave the race before any of these other guys who have endorsed him or tacitly endorsed him start helping the party. And again, to go back to an earlier point, I just wonder how, you know, that is going to be the task of the next few months, to get this party behind the likely nominee of Donald Trump. There's just so much water under the bridge. I talked to one Stop Trump donor tonight who says he's going to vote for Hillary Clinton. That story will be on Bloomberg Politics in a little while.
Coming out publicly.
Correct. And I talked to Chairman Priebus, who says he's not going to get involved after tonight, no matter what the results are, but wouldn't rule out him stepping in at some point, saying he'll know it when he sees it.
Well, so he's not going to get involved tonight, but he may eventually.
Correct. Yeah, he said even if Trump wins all 57 delegates tonight in Indiana, he doesn't anticipate anything, but wouldn't take it off the table.
Jenna, is the Trump campaign, do you think, going to have him continue to campaign as hard as he did in Indiana over the last few days, or was this a special case and the rest of the month he can focus on other things?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. But for us trail reporters, we weren't expecting him to campaign quite as heavily as he did in Indiana. But I feel
he did as much in Indiana as he did in almost any other state.
I mean, 2 rallies a day often.
3, sometimes
3. And I think that there's just this attitude of there's another month to go. Why leave anything on the table? You know, why not do an extra rally, put more money into ads, keep staffers on the ground, just so that, you know, there's no question by the time they get to the convention.
Katie, we got like 30 seconds left. Real quick on money, right? You mentioned the thing about Ed Rollins raising money, about the Trump campaign needing to start getting in that business. Will Trump become, despite all of his talk about not being a candidate of special interest and being a self-funder, will he eventually just say, forget it, I got to throw my arms around the super PAC system and just go all in? Is that where he's going to end up?
Yeah, I do think that is what is going to happen. I've had some private conversations with a lot of those in the campaign who refuse to rule that out, and I think that's an indication that, yes, they are going to do that. Listen, it's going to be an expensive season, especially going up against Hillary Clinton. I think that $1 billion number is probably pretty on the money, and the Republican establishment, the party, believes that they will be fundraising for Donald Trump, and he'll be taking that money.
All right, Kay Tur, thank you. Jenna Johnson, thank you. Mike Bender. Whatever. No, kidding. Thank you. We'll be right back.
BloombergPolitics.com tonight. All the latest results from Indiana on Bloomberg West. Ellen Powell, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Sayonara.